Ohio's lethal injection process is on trial today in the U.S. Court of Appeals. Specifically, the court is deciding whether the drug used to sedate prisoners during executions is powerful enough to prevent inhumane suffering after a series of botched attempts. Supplies of lethal injection drugs are also running low nationwide, as pharmaceutical companies refuse to sell their products to prisons. Now, some states are considering alternative forms of capital punishment, but it's not exactly a new idea.
We were on his left side, and he was already strapped to the big black chair. Had sandbags, big sandbags around it. A couple of straps on his arms. He was wearing a navy blue jumpsuit, which I thought was curious at first. Didn't realize until later that the navy blue masked the blood that pooled. So that's likely why it was chosen. Warden Turley came in, asked him if he had any last words, and he said, "I do not, no." A black hood was placed over his face, and it wasn't 30 seconds later before it was boom, boom.
On June 18, 2010, Sheryl Worsley, a local journalist, witnessed the execution of Ronnie Lee Gardner, convicted of robbery and multiple murders. He was the last American to receive the death penalty by firing squad. Ronnie's execution was national news. For the 31 states where the death penalty is legal, firing squads could be a substitute for lethal injection. In 2010, Utah was one of 2 states with the firing squad as a backup method of capital punishment. This year, Alabama lawmakers have a bill to follow in their footsteps, and other Southern lawmakers are believed to be weighing alternatives as legal challenges to lethal injection continue.
The execution felt violent, it felt jarring, but at the same time it felt clinical and professional and clean. And I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but it truly felt sterile.
That's where the 4 bullets went in, and dry blood and splatter that came out, and his heart and lung materials, everything that goes with it. These tattoos. This is kind of him. That's funny to see that, but that just shows that it's really him.
Ronnie Lee Gardner asked his brother Randy not to witness his execution. But in 2016, Randy obtained the photo records from that day. It took him 2 months to pull out the pictures and actually look at what happened to his brother. Randy says he copes through anti-death penalty activism. He has been arrested for displaying the graphic images of his brother's death at Utah's Capitol and for demonstrating in Washington, D.C. How did it change you?
I'm dreaming about it and having nightmares. Him being executed and his head being cut off and it being shot. Now that I've seen these pictures, and when I see how brutal it really was, it hurts my feelings. We felt like we're victims of a murder, really, of a state-sanctioned murder.
Ronnie Lee Gardner, his brother, talks about the fact that Ronnie Lee found God and he was changed. Well, I tell you, everybody finds God before they die.
Say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Representative Paul Ray authored the bill that brought the firing squad back as an option in Utah in 2015, and has a bill on the floor right now that adds violent sex trafficking as a capital offense.
Would your guess be that firing squad is the most humane way to carry out capital punishment?
I think it is. If you look at the other options, hanging, electrocution, and lethal injection, this is obviously the quickest, most painless way to take somebody's life.
In Utah, lethal injection is still the primary execution method. Though they don't have the drugs on hand, they hope to find them before the next executions. Of the 9 men on death row in Utah right now, 3 say they prefer death by firing squad.
Is it ever kind of crazy as a lawmaker to be talking about what the best way is to take somebody's life?
It's a big deal in Utah if we take somebody's life, and so we wanted to make sure that we were doing the things the right way, and I think by going back to what we've used, we know it works, and we've not ever had a problem with it. And these people that go to death row, they're monsters. They're not there because they sang too loud in the choir on Sunday. They're there because they killed somebody, and they're going to continue to kill people. So the only thing that we can do is terminate them.
lethal injection was considered the most humane execution. It was developed in 1977 after a 9-year national moratorium on the death penalty. In theory, it seemed like putting a horse to sleep. In practice, correctional staff were poorly trained, and the drug mixtures caused complications and slow, painful deaths in many cases.
Relative to lethal injection, a firing squad death is much quicker. We've had lethal injections in this country that have lasted over 2 hours because executioners have been trying to find a correct vein. There have been problems with the drugs. The inmate is simply not dying.
For over 25 years, Fordham Law professor Deborah Deno has studied America's repeated attempts to find humane ways to execute criminals.
A firing squad sounds pretty grisly, frankly. Does that make sense as a method for the 21st century?
There have only been 2 botches of firing squad executions and, a sample of 144 civilian executions over the course of this country's history. Both of those botches would not happen in the present day. One was because the inmate was intoxicated and moving so much that the target got displaced. In another case, the executioners purposely shot in a side of the inmate's body because they wanted that inmate to suffer. Again, we wouldn't see those kinds of incidences today.
So when people say the firing squad is a more humane way to die,
There is nothing more humane about it. They don't know. This is not humane to anybody. It's not humane to Ronnie. It's not humane to the people that do it. It's a terrible, terrible murder.